Hi, in this video I want to talk about ways to properly evaluate a thyroid. So thyroid problems are probably the most common thing that I see day in and day out in my practice. Women, mostly women, that are tired, they just don't have the energy they feel like they should have, they're having trouble losing weight, and this is even despite they're hardly eating anything in most cases. They're just not eating enough, but we'll circle back to that later. They brain fog, depression, hair loss, uh, those kinds of things. And they have been to their primary care doctor in most cases, and they're told everything looks fine. And if you've been following me for any amount of time, you'll know that I don't believe that just evaluating a TSH on a blood panel is enough to get an accurate picture of what someone's thyroid is really completely doing. So let's talk specifically about the tests that I like to look at and why I like to look at them. So when I evaluate someone's thyroid, I do look at the TSH. That's called thyroid stimulating hormone. And what that does is it tells you what your body's demand for thyroid hormones are. So it's this, it's kind of like a reverse marker, if you will. It makes it a little bit confusing to some people. High levels of that mean your thyroid is underactive, and your thyroid stimulating hormone is trying to get your thyroid to produce more hormones, hence the name thyroid stimulating hormone. So that's why it goes high. Now, if you have an overactive thyroid, then that number, that TSH number, will be lower because you don't need as much thyroid hormone. You have too much of it. So the higher that number, the slower your thyroid, generally speaking. That's obviously, this is an oversimplification, but it works 9 times out of 10. This is going to be true. So that's the first thing that we start with. But what you need to know is that the range for TSH is crazy. They have in reference ranges, depending on what lab you use. I use LabCorp, and theirs is 0.5 to 4.5 is their reference range. That is a huge range. People are just not healthy when their TSH levels are above about 2.2 or so. They just don't feel good, and it's what I would consider a subclinical thyroid slowdown. So your thyroid is slowing down, it just doesn't meet the criteria. So when you work with a functional medicine practitioner, that's what I am, someone that does functional healthcare, you will find that their range for a TSH is somewhere between 1.0 and 2.0 or 2.2, somewhere in that right down the middle lane, because we want to talk about values that create health, not just the absence of a glaring disease that needs medication for the rest of your life. So with TSH, you need to start to pay attention to that TSH when it's outside of that 1 to 2 optimal range. So that's the first thing that we look at. Then we look at something called T3 and T4. And what's really important is that you look at the free versions of these. That's what's circulating around. It's unbound. It's what you can use and your body can do something with. So we start with T4, and that is the hormone that is produced consistently by your body. But it has to be converted to something called T3 for it to be active and taken in by your thyroid and used. So we like to look at the T4 and the T3 numbers. And what we find in some people is that their T4 numbers are high, but then their free T4 numbers are high, but their free T3 numbers can be not as high as you would expect, because you would want someone to be converting that T4 to T3 and then using the T3 to do all the things that healthy thyroids do, like control your metabolism, control your temperature, all those things so your hair doesn't fall out, all of those things that proper thyroid function does. So what I find a lot is that not only are those numbers not on the test that people bring me, they say, look, I had my thyroid done, it looks fine. And what they have is a TSH, and their number's like 3.2 or something like that. And so to me, that is a TSH out of range. And then now we need to look at all the other players in in the thyroid game to see what exactly is going on. Because if you have a high level of T4 and then you have a low level of T3, you know you're not converting. So why are you not converting? So there's a lot of nutrients that play in that game. Iodine, selenium, vitamin D, the B vitamins, all of those things that if you don't have those proper nutrients, it's hard to convert. You can also have a situation where you don't have the nutrients to actually make the T4 in the first place. So a lot of those same nutrients, not only do they help create the T4 in the first place, but they help convert the T4 to the T3. So you've got this situation where nutrient deficiencies and the thyroid are really important. So you know, the big ones, like I said, selenium, iodine, B vitamins, E, A, C, D, vitamin D. A lot of people are vitamin D deficient, and that can play into this thyroid hormone creation and conversion issue. So you've got that piece of it. The other thing that can be happening is you've got T4, but instead of converting to T3, it's converting to something called reverse T3. And you can think of reverse T3, I think of it like as an imposter T3. It's something that will attach to, so you've got these thyroid receptor sites, right? And when T4 converts to T3, it goes to the thyroid receptor sites where it can be taken in and used. Well, if you create more reverse T3 than you do T3, something else comes into that thyroid receptor site and attaches to it, and it's not thyroid hormone. So these are things like members of the halide family, and that is a big fancy way to say things like fluoride, chlorine, bromide. Bromide or bromine is in pesticides that's sprayed a lot of times on berries. So if you're buying conventional strawberries and blueberries and blackberries and raspberries, they're a lot of times sprayed with a bromine pesticide, and so you're ingesting that. If you eat a lot of wheat products are a double whammy because number one, most processed wheat is what's called bleached and bromated. So it's soaked in this bleachy bromine solution. So you're eating the bromide or the bromine, and then also wheat has something called gliadin in it. It's a protein, and that can do the same thing with attaching to those receptor sites. So wheat and thyroids don't really get along. So if you have or suspect a thyroid problem, wheat's got to go. So that's the other thing that can happen there. And then, so we talked about a TSH, we talked about T3 and T4, the free levels of both of those hormones, and we talked about reverse T3. Now, the other thing that I always put on my thyroid panels are TPO and TG antibodies. So those stand for thyroglobulin antibodies, that's TG, and thyroid peroxide antibodies. So TPO, TG for short, but what those are is those are antibodies against your own thyroid. And so 90% of the time when a thyroid gland has slowed down, it is because it's under attack by your own body. It's an autoimmune situation. So I think that is super important to know. In the medical world, very, very, it's very rare that someone is told whether they have an autoimmune thyroid problem or just a slowdown of their thyroid. And so, because the medical answer is to treat those things the same. It's a slow thyroid, we're just going to give you some thyroid hormone, usually in the form of a synthetic form of this T4, which is like a Synthroid or a levothyroxine or something like that. But if you don't know that your body is under attack by your own self, this is an autoimmune condition, you can't take the proper steps to reverse that autoimmune process that has started. And that can not only affect your thyroid, but that can go on to affect so many other things. So I think it's absolutely imperative that someone knows whether or not their thyroid problem is coming from their own body, or whether it's just a situation where we need some extra nutrients and we're not converting and things like that. So that is the way that I evaluate a thyroid. That is something that I do on everyone that comes to me and even says anything about that I think the thyroid, we just look at those things, because if they're all good, then that's great. But if there's an issue that we want to catch before it becomes a major issue, then I would rather be on the proactive side of it. If it were me and my thyroid was starting to misbehave, if you will, I would want to know so that I can catch it and I can do the lifestyle things before it gets to the point where it's totally destroyed itself, and then I don't have any other choice but to stay on a prescription thyroid hormone for the rest of my life. I want the chance to not only fix that problem naturally, but to stop that autoimmune process, because like I said, 90% of the time thyroid breakdown comes from your own body. That's the reason your thyroid is slowing down, is because it's under attack by itself, from itself. And if we don't address that, then all these other autoimmune conditions like lupus, Raynaud's, rheumatoid arthritis, some other things really can start to show up because we have an overactive immune situation, and it just goes on to moves from one gland to the other to another. So anyway, I hope this is a little bit of a window into functional health evaluation of a thyroid, and I hope that this has been helpful for you.